Wonderful. We have people. No problem, Rochelle. Good thing we've got mobile phones at least. Okay. Okay. Do I go? Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for bearing with us. Rochelle and I have had a few technical issues. The little person you see on the screen is my son Logan. And I'm going to be talking about him this evening. But first of all, I'm going to introduce myself. My name's Jess Carpenter. I've been involved with Escaping Your Comfort Zone for probably close to 3 years now. Long-time Facebook stalker before I actually joined a walk with Donna in Geelong. Hi, Julie. And I was probably about 5 months pregnant with Logan when I did my first walk in Geelong. And then after I had Logan, quickly decided that this was something I wanted to have more to do with and have become one of the leaders and have a great time just having pretty chilled strolls around things like botanical gardens and stuff. So tonight I'm going to be talking to you about my son Logan. He has just turned 2. He is super cheeky. He will climb into your eyeballs if you give him half a chance, but most 2-year-olds do. He's my little superhero. So Logan, in the first 12 months of his life, went through 3 open heart surgeries, and he's now the super cheeky, happy toddler that's into all the things all the time. So I'm going to talk to you about Logan's story. So this is Logan, and this is me when I'm about 9 months pregnant in the hospital bathroom at the women's hospital. So when I was about 35 weeks pregnant, I went in for a routine ultrasound on a Friday afternoon, not expecting anything exciting, just a growth scan because I had gestational diabetes during my pregnancy. That meant I needed to have regular growth scans to make sure the baby wasn't getting too big. And because it was a routine scan, my partner Brad hadn't come with me because he worked in Melbourne, we lived in Geelong. He would have effectively had to take a whole day off work for a 20-minute scan. So I went into this ultrasound and the lady was there, and we had told every scan that we'd been to the person doing the scan that we didn't want to find out the sex of the baby. It was going to be a surprise for us, and that if I needed to, just tell me when I'd close my eyes. And during the scan, she told me a couple of times to close my eyes, and that's fine. And then it was all sort of finishing up, and she's like, I'm just going to get someone to come in and have a look at this. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And then someone else came in and had a look, and then they're like, oh, we're just going to get the doctor to come in and have a look at these. And I was like, okay, that's a bit strange, but whatever. And then the doctor came in, and then they started talking, and they started saying things like 50% smaller and aortic arch and all of these kind of vaguely heart-related things. But they weren't talking to me, they were talking to each other whilst I was lying there on the table with my tummy out. And I knew enough to know that something wasn't right, but not enough to know what was wrong. And then from there, I was sent straight up to the maternity ward in the hospital. And then I spoke to a doctor there, and then the doctor said, you've got an appointment at the Women's Hospital in Melbourne on Tuesday. You need to be there. And I was like, what is going on? And they said that they've discovered something's not quite right with your baby's heart, that the left side isn't growing as big as it should, and that we want to do some more tests to see what was happening. So we caught the train up to Melbourne the next Tuesday, where I had one of the longest ultrasounds I've ever had in my life. And this very kind doctor sat us down in this little room and said, I'll give you guys a couple of minutes. I'll be back in a second, and I'll answer all your questions. And basically he came in and he said that your child's heart is small on the left side and that their aortic arch is quite narrow. I've got some pictures for you guys in a minute that'll explain this better. And that I was going to be having my baby at the Women's Hospital in Melbourne and that I'd be having it pretty soon. So I was about sort of 35 and a half weeks at this point, and knew that I was probably going to be delivering at about 38 weeks, and they brought that forward a little bit. So this is me in hospital. Love a selfie. I was in the Women's Hospital, fortunately had a bed next to a window so I could look out at all the exciting things on Flemington Road. This is me the night before we had Logan when they started the induction process. So I was incredibly fortunate that I had a very uneventful birth. I went from being, okay, this is fine, to I think the baby's coming now, to the baby's coming right now. The poor midwife had to call a code blue to get all the doctors and nurses in the room in time. And luckily for me, 5 pushes later and Logan was out. It was amazing. I'd recommend it. Then we had our little boy, Logan Henry Jones, who was born on the 26th of June 2018. He was he was a healthy, pink, screaming his head off little baby. You can see there's a nurse already trying to put a needle in his arm. I will say that some of their photos are a little bit confronting, and if you don't want to see them, I'll let you know beforehand. Just minimize the screen. You should still be able to hear me. I got a very brief huddle with him for probably about 10 minutes where he pretty much screamed his head off the entire time, before he was taken down to the NICU in the hospital, where they were preparing him to be taken straight to the Children's Hospital where he would be prepared for surgery. So this is me just having had a baby. And then these are some stats around congenital heart disease in Australia. So congenital heart disease is the most common birth defect affecting babies in Australia, and it is the highest reason for death in babies in Australia. 8 babies are born with a heart condition every day in Australia, and 1 in 100 babies are born with some sort of congenital heart disease. Heartkids are an amazing organisation that I'll talk about later on, who support families of children who have heart conditions. So this is Logan getting ready to be transported to the Children's Hospital. So he was starting to work pretty hard to breathe fairly soon after being born. That's why he's lying on his tummy. They've already got some drugs going into him straight away. And there's a nappy there for just precautions, basically. Next thing they did was move him straight to the Children's Hospital. And this is him in his bed at the Children's Hospital within 4 hours of being born. You can see there he's already on oxygen. And that night he was intubated and put on a ventilator. And then he then stayed on that ventilator for the next 6 weeks. So this is him the next morning with his ventilator tube, his little octopus that we were given by the hospital, and this blanket that I'd slept with the last couple of nights previous to me having had him. Sorry, I'm just going to pull my notes up because they've disappeared off the screen. So Logan's initial diagnosis was hypoplastic left heart and hypoplastic aortic arch. So we knew he was going to be having surgery within days of being born. We just weren't 100% sure when. So this is his little hand on my hand at 2 days old. So this is sort of an explanation of Logan's first lot of surgery. So this is what a healthy heart looks like. This is your aortic arch. The blood goes up here. From here it goes up to your arms and your head, and then it goes back down to the rest of your body. Logan's arch was quite narrow. So you can see here it's quite narrow. And the surgery that they did was they basically put a patch in here to widen this section out. And they did that on him at 3 days old. So I will warn you that the next few photos are Logan post-surgery. So there's tubes, there's wires, there's all sorts of things. If you don't want to see those, that's fine. Just feel free to minimize your screen now. And then I'll continue talking. I'll just give you a second to do that. Okay. So this is Logan after his first surgery. So this is him, I think, about 48 hours after that surgery. While Logan was having his surgery, my sister and I went shopping, and we got these blankets with and had his name embroidered on them. And because things often go missing in hospitals, we had 3 of them made. We came home from hospital with 2 of them. This is Brad, my partner, standing next to a tiny little Logan there. And you can see all of the infusions running and his drains and all sorts of things. This is Logan without most of his dressing. So he's had some of the tubes taken out. He's had some of the drains taken out, and his chest is all nice and healing. So the next picture might be a little bit confronting. When tiny, oh no, it's not, it's just me. That's fine. Cuddling a baby with tubes is really quite challenging. It took 2 nurses and me about 10 minutes to get him 1.5 meters from his bed to my lap. Logan was a normal sized baby, but still a tiny newborn. And when you add all that stuff on, it just makes it incredibly complicated. Logan had some issues after his first surgery. One of them was he had a whole bunch of air in his tummy. So what you can see here are air bubbles. And basically the only way to get rid of air bubbles is to fart them out. So his room was pretty stinky for a few days, but it helped him get rid of all of the air that was in there. Unfortunately, when they were checking to see how he was going after his first lot of surgeries, Logan's aortic arch got damaged. And this damage created some backflow of the blood through the heart, so it was going the wrong way. That meant that he wasn't getting better. And it took them about 3 weeks to figure this out. And he kind of got to a point, and then he just stopped getting better. He wasn't getting worse, but he wasn't getting better, and we didn't know why. And eventually they did some more tests and they figured out what had happened. So the next slide picture explains what had happened to Logan. So basically, this is your aortic valve here, and that goes out up around the aortic arch and then down to your body. This valve here got damaged and wasn't working anymore. So the miracle workers that are the cardiac surgeons at the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne removed Logan's pulmonary valve replaced his aortic valve with the pulmonary valve. And then this valve here became what's called a conduit, which is basically, well, at the moment, it's a cow jugular. So the cells, there's no cow DNA in there as such. It's just a scaffold that his body kind of grows around, but it's not a permanent fix. And so Logan had to have this replaced again when he was 8 months old, and that was his third lot of surgery. So the first time this was replaced was his second surgery, and then again when he was 8 months old. Right now, this valve, the aortic valve, works really well. The pulmonary valve has a little bit of leakage, and his mitral valve has a little bit of leakage. Fortunately for us, when they did his first lot of surgery, they decided that the left side of his heart actually had grown enough that it was going to do its job by itself. And so Logan still has a heart that functions normally. It's just had a little bit of piping replaced, basically. So the next photo is definitely one can be a little bit confronting. Logan's chest was left open for about 2 days after his surgery. And because with tiny babies, there's no room for swelling. And so they often leave them open for a little while just to make sure there's no swelling. And also if there's any issues that arise, to have easy access. So this is Logan after his second lot of surgery. You can see he's there still with his octopus. His octopus didn't leave his side until we got home. Lots of lines, lots of drains, lots of wires, lots of all sorts of things. The next picture shows some of the drugs that he was on. When he came back from his second surgery, there was 15 of these machines running, which is an insane amount. But yeah, 15 of these machines running. So anyone that's minimized me, feel free to come back. They're nice, happy baby photos now. We're still in hospital, in ICU, but they're happy baby photos. So this is Logan. This is his first outfit that he ever wore. A girlfriend of mine gave it to me. And if you can't read it, it says born in 2018. He only just fit it, and I think this is the only time he ever wore it because by the time he could actually wear clothes, he got too big already. We spent 6 weeks in intensive care in the Royal Children's Hospital, which is an incredible place. It took me about 4.5 weeks to realise that we were in intensive care because they call it PICU or Rosella, and in my head that was something else. And it wasn't until I saw another baby in another room that just happened to be across the hall from us go into cardiac arrest, and I saw a nurse doing CPR, that I realised that we're in intensive care and people get better or they don't, and they're the only two options for where we were. While we were there, I blindly refused to believe anything other than Logan was going to be completely fine. I think the doctors questioned that a couple of times. I think my family questioned that a couple of times, but I didn't. He was going to be fine, and the doctors were going to do whatever they needed to do to make that happen. While we were in intensive care, they tried to take his breathing tube out twice. He didn't like that and wanted it back, so they put it back in twice. And then finally, when he was about 5.5 weeks old, they took it out and he was happy with it out. He went on to what's called CPAP, which basically it's like when you're blowing up a balloon. CPAP's that first little breath that stretches everything out, and then Logan did everything else himself. So we moved from Rosella, which is the PICU part of the hospital in the Children's Hospital, to, these are just some more times. This is Logan moving into a big blow bed after being in a tiny little cot, and all of a sudden he became tiny again. And this is just a little video of him having some milk. So I expressed the whole time Logan was in hospital, and he used to get a taste of milk a couple of meals at a time from a syringe. And you can see he's fairly alert there. This is just after he'd been extubated onto CPAP. He still has a tube, but this tube only went down to the back of his throat. It didn't go all the way down into his lungs. So this is just me and Logan in hospital, super excited because he's just been extubated to CPAP, which for us was a major, major hurdle. So when I was in hospital, it was like I had to share my baby with the hospital. Logan wasn't my baby, he was the hospital's baby. And that was because I basically had no control. I didn't have any. I completely trusted the doctors and the nurses and the staff at the hospital to do whatever they needed to do to make sure he was healthy. And when it came to his day-to-day cares, I could help with some things, but really I had to ask the nurses first. And so I was sharing my baby with the hospital and they were in charge of what was happening. And once Logan finally got onto this CPAP, he all of a sudden became a lot more accessible. I could pick him up by myself for the first time. And this is one of those times where I got to do that. This is my smiley little monkey with his CPAP mask that he had to wear for about a week or 2 weeks before they let us go into the koala ward. So there he's getting some more milk. He loved his milk and we really wanted to try breastfeeding, and so to keep that sucking reflex he needed to have things orally. This is a very blurry photo of Logan leaving PICU at the Children's Hospital and going onto the koala ward, which is their cardiac ward. So he spent 58 days on Rizal, so 58 days in intensive care, so the first 58 days of his life. All of a sudden, I got my baby back. He became my baby and I had some say in what happened. He was still having regular ultrasounds. Usually he'd just fall asleep. And I got to spend time with him. I could take him out of bed. We could snuggle. So I had my own bed in the hospital and we could snuggle on the bed. I got a pram and I could push him around in the hospital. And all of a sudden he became my baby and I could do what I wanted. I could pick him up when I wanted. I could feed him. I could do all the things that a normal mother gets to do that I hadn't been able to do for a long time. So here he is in bed. We're trying to sort of start some play stuff at about 2.5 months old by now. And there we started to get some smiles. So smiles are the best things ever. And they often take a while to come. And when he started smiling, then it was the best thing ever. So this is just a little clip of him moving around and starting to say some things and smile. When he was awake, he was super alert because by now we'd pretty much got him off all of the drugs and he was on everything. So this is our hospital room. You can see at the front there's Logan's bed, there's my bed in the background, there's the pram. Behind that door there is our own private bathroom. Staying in the Children's Hospital is like staying in a weird hotel. You have your own space, but you have these people that just walk in and out at all times of the day and night. And you can see over there on the right-hand side behind Logan is like the clinical space. So that's where they organise his medication and the nurses do all their stuff. And then this side of the bed was sort of the home space. So this is the first picture I have of Logan without tubes in his face. He was he had a feeding tube for about 4.5 months. And this was where they were changing his feeding tube to a different kind of feeding tube just before we were leaving the hospital for the very first time to go home. So this is 2 days later in Geelong Hospital, us leaving to go home. We were taking Logan home at 3 months old. So we spent the first 3 months of Logan's life in hospital. And this is me just walking out of hospital, absolutely loving life because my baby's mine and I don't have to share him with anybody. So this is Logan at home at night, the first time in his bed. And all of a sudden I had a baby that I needed to get to know. I needed to figure out all the things that a normal parent usually figures out in the first few hours. All of a sudden it was real. So Logan pulled his feeding tube out the very second day. The first day we were at home, first morning, he pulled his feeding tube out. Fortunately, it was just after I had given him a feed, and so we had about 4 hours before we needed to put it back in, of which we needed to go to the hospital for. So a quick call to the Geelong Children's Ward and said, this is Logan, he needs to come in to have a feeding tube put back in. And fortunately for us, that was quite uneventful and quite easy. So this is what life is like when you've got a tube-fed baby. You put the formula into the syringe and then it gravity feeds into his tummy. So this is our dog Rusty, who at the moment is like a grumpy big brother, but at first time he was very excited to meet Logan, and that's his ball that he wanted to play with Logan. So we didn't have a bath where we lived, so we had baths in the kitchen sink. He quickly outgrew those, and we started having baths in big washing up tubs, and then he graduated to just having showers with us, and that was the easiest thing. So this is just a little burrito baby, smiley baby, who's just pulled his feeding tube out. You can see the line on his cheek where the tube had been. He pulled the tube out and it never went back in again. He didn't really need it again. And we were super, super pleased about that. So we had a brief stint in hospital a few weeks after we came home, where the first surgery that they did, where they put that patch in to widen his arch, had started to narrow again a little bit. So they did a balloon catheter procedure to put a balloon in there to stretch things out a little bit to try and fix that. It still to this day is narrower than it should be, but as you'll see, doesn't stop him at all. So there's him recovering from that lot of very minor procedure. So this is Logan's first hike. Some of you guys might recognize this place. It's Lake Elizabeth, near Forest, sort of a bit past Geelong. And my partner and I, Brad, we went there when we first started dating. And then we took Logan out there as his first hike, and I carried him in the baby carrier, and we did the loop of the lake. He slept most of the way, but he was awake for a little while. Logan chews on everything, even today. It started off with fingers and now it's all the things. Life as parents was pretty full on, but we got out and just took Logan with us everywhere. This is what it takes when you travel to Tasmania with a baby. He was about 5 months old here, and fortunately when you fly anywhere with a baby, you have to pay about $30 and they will give you, you then can take a pram, a car seat, a high chair, and I think another item if need be for nothing, which is amazing because otherwise it would have cost a fortune in excess baggage. Logan and Rusty are best mates most of the time. This is Logan at my mum's birthday. He was about 6 months old. And there was a band, so he had headphones on for the night and fortunately just slept through most of the event, which was great. There he is asleep. This is Logan on our first camping trip. You have to take so much stuff when you're camping with a baby. This is what it takes to sterilize bottles when they're 6 months old when you're camping. And we took Logan camping a few times in the January of last year. And this is what it took every day. Fortunately, he slept still really well and would sleep everywhere. This was us back in hospital again when he needed to have his last lot of surgery. And this surgery was only, we were only in hospital for 6 days, which was amazing. I was fully expecting us to be there for a couple of weeks, but Logan followed the playbook and did all the things he was meant to do this time and was trying to roll over before he had his drains taken out. He was ready to go. So this is just before he went in for surgery. This is him after his first lot of surgery. So he got quite swollen, which is not unusual. After surgery, his body retains a lot of fluid, so he was on medication for a while to help get rid of that fluid. But you can see there he's breathing completely by himself. He's just got a few drugs running and a few drains to make sure that everything does what it's meant to. And this is just him awake and happy and ready to play. His oxygen saturation was dropping a little bit, so they just gave him an oxygen mask to chew on, and that was enough to get it back up again. You can see he's pretty much ready to go. So there he's asleep. By now he started eating some real food. We got to test Logan's allergy stuff while we were in hospital. So when you have baby, they say just give them one thing at a time. Do it slowly. So Logan's egg test was done while we were still in hospital because it was on the menu for his meal one day. This is him about 3 days post-op. You can see he almost looks completely normal again. He still had all the lines and things in. But he was happy and ready to go. He's still not a fan of broccoli. I had to change my sheets after this event because it went everywhere except in his mouth. We're just at home now. You can see very faintly on his chest there's a scar there, but it fades so quickly with little babies that it's still there, but you don't notice it. Life after surgery for us was just that of normal parents. We got to do all the normal things. Logan gets to live a normal life. He gets to eat all the things that he's not meant to do, like rocks and leaves and dirt and grass, like all other children do. He loved, once he got mobile, you can see there's some gravel. And he just did all the things that we do. So this is another walk that we did with some beautiful Geelong people. It was along the waterfront and I can't remember who ran it, but it was a great walk and Logan had a ball. This was one of the first walks I ever did, and it was to Buckley Falls, and Logan came with me and decided that the stairs were the thing that he needed to tackle once I'd pushed the pram up to the top. And this is us just camping. So life for us now is pretty normal. We have a Heartkid who when you compare him with a lot of our other Heartkids, is so incredibly healthy, so incredibly happy, and we have no issues with him ongoing. My in-laws decided that it would be a great idea for us to climb a mountain. I wasn't super keen on the idea, but didn't really have much of a choice, so I carried, at this point in time, an 11-kilo Logan up Mount Cobbler. To say it was a mission is the understatement of the year. But we made it. He slept or cried most of the way. I don't know what this video is going to be. Oh, there we go. This is really cute. Hopefully it works for you guys. No, it's not going to load. Logan discovered muesli bars and Weet-Bix on this camping trip and would help himself. So he's about 3 muesli bars on the go at once there. They all still have their packaging on. So this is a walk that we did with Rochelle. It was one of her morning walks, I think. Up along the top of cliffs, or not cliffs, but sand dunes. I don't know what's going on. So where to next for Logan? He will need to have more surgery as he gets bigger. So like I was saying before, the things that they've put in are basically just, they don't last forever. So what happens is his body eventually recognizes them as a foreign body and they start to calcify, so they get really stiff. And so the valves that are there to keep the blood going the right direction get stiff and they stop working properly. And they eventually need to be replaced. So when that happens, we're not entirely sure. They kind of gave us a ballpark time frame of 3 to 5 years from his last lot of surgery. And so we expect him to probably need surgery just before he starts school. But at this stage, we'll just see how things go. There we are, Bindery Falls in the high country up near Craig's Hut. I don't know why it's gone so slowly. So another thing I wanted to talk about is an incredible organisation called Heartkid, and I mentioned them before. Oh, this is Logan dancing at the Port Fairy Folk Festival. He had the best time, and so did my mum. Who you can see him dancing with here if it loads. So Heartkids are an organisation that are there to support families of people who have children with a heart condition. They were there for us while we were in hospital. That's trying to catch a photo of Logan now. Almost impossible because he doesn't stop moving. I did notice that most of my photos of Logan now are of the back of him because he's running away pretty much all the time. This is what camping's like with a baby now. So one thing I did want to mention to you guys as well was on the 18th of October, Heartkids do, so every year they do a walk to help raise awareness for heart conditions in children, and it's called the 2 Feet and a Heartbeat Walk. And this year they've gone virtual because obviously we can't have big meetings of people in Victoria at the moment. And so on the 18th of October, they're running that walk. It's an incredibly cheap registration. It might be $20 or $30. And if you guys wanted to do that walk, that would be amazing. It's just something that you could do. There's going to be some online events around it. You get some cool socks and a couple of flags. But yeah, I think I might finish there. I've just got a couple more photos to scroll through. But if anyone has any questions, feel free to type them into the comments box and I will answer any questions that you may have. This is what it's like following a 2-year-old around the bush. He has earmuffs on because Brad's chainsawing in the background. These are few and far between now. So this is my cheeky toddler. Loves a walk in his car. Will occasionally go in the pram, but more than likely will want to push the pram himself. Or run away. Or lie down in the middle of a car park. Oh, goodness me. Okay, so I've just caught up on all of your comments. The beanie in the dirt eating face, Kylie. Dirt eating is Logan's life. Fortunately, he's a little bit past it now, but will still chew on crayons. Does anyone have any more questions? This is the last picture I have. Super mum. Do you know what, Jasmine? Someone asked me what my profession was the other day, and I said stay-at-home super parent. And I thought that was appropriate. Any more questions? If not, I might end it here. And I'll do